The sun was setting over the old Henderson ranch when Sarah and her daughter Emma found themselves trembling behind the weathered oak tree. The two women had been walking back from the creek when they heard the voices of angry men approaching through the tall grass. Their white cotton dresses were stained with dirt and fear had settled deep in their hearts. Sarah pulled Emma closer, feeling her daughter's rapid heartbeat against her chest. The voices grew louder and she could make out harsh words about debts and consequences and things that made her stomach turn. They had nowhere to run. The creek was too far behind them and the house seemed like miles away across the open field. "They're going to kill us," Emma whispered so quietly that her mother almost didn't hear the words. That's when they saw him. Old Thomas Henderson emerged from behind his chestnut mare, leading the horse with calm, steady steps. He wore his usual work clothes and his weathered cowboy hat sat at the same angle it had for 30 years. The man walked like he owned every inch of the earth beneath his boots, and in a way he did. This land had been in his family for 3 generations. Sarah had known Thomas since she was Emma's age. Their families had been neighbors back when the world seemed smaller and kinder. Her late husband had worked these very fields during harvest seasons, and Thomas had always treated him with respect even when times were hard. The angry voices stopped when they saw the rancher. The men who had been hunting Sarah and Emma suddenly found themselves face to face with someone they hadn't expected, someone whose reputation in these parts ran deeper than the roots of the ancient oaks. Thomas walked right up to where Sarah and Emma were hiding. He didn't look at them directly but positioned himself between the frightened women and the approaching strangers. His presence was like a shield made of quiet strength and unspoken promises. The lead man stepped forward. He was younger than Thomas but carried himself with the kind of swagger that comes from intimidating people who can't fight back. His companions spread out slightly as if they were surrounding prey. "We're looking for Sarah Mitchell," the man announced. "She owes money to some important people and we're here to collect." Thomas adjusted his hat brim lower over his eyes and took a step closer to the strangers. He didn't raise his voice or make any threatening gestures. He simply stood there like a mountain that had decided to plant itself in their path. "This is private property," Thomas said in a voice that carried the weight of decades, "and these ladies are under my protection." The younger man laughed but it sounded forced. "Listen, old-timer, we don't want any trouble with you. Just hand over the woman and we'll be on our way." That's when Thomas leaned in close to the man and whispered something that Sarah couldn't hear. The words were so quiet that even Emma, who was straining to listen, caught only the sound of breath moving between lips. But whatever Thomas said made the color drain from the younger man's face. The stranger took a step backward and his confidence crumbled like old leather. His companions sensed the change and their cocky postures shifted to something more uncertain, more afraid. Sarah watched in amazement as the men who had been hunting them just moments before began to retreat. They didn't run exactly, but they moved with the kind of urgency that comes from suddenly remembering you have somewhere very important to be. Within minutes the strangers were gone. Their voices faded into the distance and the evening air returned to its peaceful rhythm of crickets and wind through grass. Thomas turned to face Sarah and Emma for the first time since he'd appeared. His weathered face showed the kind of gentleness that comes from a lifetime of caring for living things. "Are you ladies all right?" he asked. Sarah found her voice finally. "Thomas, what did you say to them? What made them leave like that?" The old rancher smiled and it transformed his entire face, making him look decades younger. "I told them that Sarah Mitchell died last winter," he said simply, "and that her daughter Emma went to live with relatives back east." Emma looked confused. "But we're right here." Thomas nodded. "Yes you are, but they're not looking for you anymore, they're looking for ghosts." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she understood what he meant. Thomas was offering them something more precious than gold. He was offering them a new beginning, a chance to disappear from the troubles that had been chasing them. "I could use help running this place," Thomas continued. "The ranch is too big for one old man and there's a cottage out back that's been empty too long. It needs a woman's touch and maybe some young energy to bring it back to life." The offer hung in the air like morning mist, full of possibility and hope. Sarah thought about her late husband and how he used to say that kindness was the only currency that never lost its value. She thought about Emma and the future they could have here on this land where safety felt as solid as the ground beneath their feet. "We don't have anything to pay you with," Sarah said. Thomas waved his hand dismissively. "Payment comes in many forms: a good meal at the end of a long day, someone to talk to during the quiet hours, help with the horses when they're being stubborn. That's worth more than money to a man my age." Emma stepped forward with the kind of courage that young people find when they see hope on the horizon. "Mr. Henderson, are you sure about this? We're strangers to you now." Thomas looked at her with eyes that held a lifetime of wisdom. "Child, I've known your mother since she was smaller than you are now, and I know good people when I see them. Your mama raised you right, and that's all the reference I need." As they walked toward the house with the mare trailing behind them, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. She felt safe. She felt like she belonged somewhere again, like there might be tomorrow worth waking up for. The cottage Thomas had mentioned was small but sturdy, with a front porch that faced the sunrise and windows that let in light from every direction. It needed work, but it felt like home in a way that surprised them both. That first evening they sat on Thomas's main porch sharing a simple meal of bread and soup. The old rancher told them stories about the land and the seasons and the animals that had made the ranch their home over the years. His voice carried the rhythm of someone who had learned patience from watching things grow. "Why did you help us?" Sarah asked as the stars began to appear. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "My Martha used to say that kindness is like water," he finally replied. "It always finds its way to where it's needed most. She's been gone 5 years now, but I still hear her voice telling me to do the right thing." Emma had fallen asleep in her chair, and Sarah covered her with an old quilt that smelled like lavender and memories. "Those men believed you," Sarah said, "when you told them we were dead. Why?" Thomas chuckled softly. "Reputation is a funny thing. Sometimes the stories people tell about you become more powerful than the truth. I may be just an old rancher, but in this county people know that my word is solid as stone. When I tell them something, they tend to believe it." Sarah understood then that Thomas Henderson was more than just a kind neighbor. He was a pillar in this community, someone whose integrity had been built over decades of keeping promises and treating people fairly. "We'll earn our keep," she promised. "Emma and we know how to work hard." "I'm counting on it," Thomas replied. "This old place needs life in it again, needs the sound of laughter and the sight of laundry on the line, needs someone to care about whether the garden grows and the chickens lay their eggs." As the weeks turned to months, Sarah and Emma settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Emma helped with the horses and turned out to have a gift for gentling even the most stubborn animals. Sarah took over the kitchen and the garden, bringing flavors and colors back to a house that had been living in shades of gray. The three of them became a family of choice, bound not by blood but by mutual respect and genuine affection. Thomas taught Emma how to read the weather and understand the needs of growing things. Sarah cooked meals that made the old rancher remember why food could be more than just fuel. They never saw the strangers again. The outside world seemed to accept that Sarah Mitchell and her daughter had vanished like morning dew, leaving behind only the Henderson family and their quiet, peaceful ranch. Sometimes in the evening when the work was done and they sat together on the porch watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold, Sarah would remember the terrible moment when Emma had whispered about death, but now those words seemed like echoes from another lifetime. Thomas had whispered something that day too, something about ghosts and new beginnings, and in doing so he had given them the greatest gift of all. He had given them the chance to be alive.